All right, welcome everybody to the Synapse Philosophy Group. We are on Stevenson's text. We are on the principle number 6, page 239, and we're going to go through 6, 7, and 8 tonight, okay? Anybody have any new business or anything that they want to talk about before we get started? I'll take that as a no. All right, the principle of time, principle number 6. There is no process which does not require time. Since action of matter implies a process of events,
procession.
Excuse me.
Procession of events.
Why don't you read that one, Alan? Why don't you take it over?
That's fine. Since action of matter implies a procession of events, a continuity, naturally time enters into the triunity as an element. Time is an element necessary to the bond between intelligence and matter. Force is a word implying action. Action is process. Action implies one event after another. One event after another, forming a series, implies time. No happening, even though it takes only a moment, but happens in a unit of time or a fraction of a unit of time.
You know, Pasquale talked about breaking the sound barrier when we're doing that adjustment. And if you see those jets, when they break that sound barrier, that water vapor, you know, around the jet. And when we're giving that a moment of the adjustment, you know, that vibration travels through, might be one moment of a second, a millisecond, a microsecond, but we have enormous change in the system, whether they feel it or not, or know it or not. What do you guys feel about that? Any feedback on principle number 6?
I love principle number 6 and used to talk about it all the time with chiropractors too, because it's people expect, if you're treating symptoms, you want them to change now. And everything takes time, and you don't have control of the time. You put in a force that the body's going to use, and then it's going to decide how to use it and where it wants to use it. And that's a force, a physical force, which is different from the force that we talk about when we're talking about the cycles here. And that's a confusing point for us, I think. The difference between the force that we use when we touch somebody and thrust versus the force that's intelligence, force, and matter.
Absolutely. And, you know, we don't know what the time the body is taking for that healing, or where it's going, what it needs to do. And when we talk about clinical outcomes, somebody's been posting a lot about clinical outcomes. What the hell is a clinical outcome? I have no idea what the body is going to do. It's not up to me. Your leg might get short, might get longer, and you might look balanced, but you still have sciatic pain, but your kidney might be healing. And I tell a story about my mother all the time. When her sciatic pain was worse and worse and worse, it was actually her kidney going back to 8 centimeters and functioning. So we have no idea what the body is doing. I'm not the doctor. The doctor is within. You know, that was a poignant thing, but thank you for that, Alan. That was great. Good reading. I got a lot of, it's nice to hear it this time. You did a good job at it. Once I started getting tongue-tied, I'm like, I'll let Alan handle that. Anybody else? What do you feel about that, Dave? You like principle number 6. I like that. How about you, Steve? What do you feel? What's on your mind?
That's a dangerous question.
I've been doing a lot of contemplating and about things like being present in the moment. The mind is present in the moment, and time with quantum, I'm just thinking, yeah, the effects it has in the body takes time. There's motion with matter, but there's also something else that's timeless. And, you know, it just, when I talk about time, I also, you know, the way my mind works is there's time, and then there's spirit where there is no time. There's always 100% intelligence. That's what I'm thinking.
I like that. That's beautiful. I'm going to read from Dee Dee. And I do this in innate adjusting. We talk about a lot about DD. It's very difficult to change the medical fighter into the peaceful chiropractor. That's from page 117 in 1910. Now, when we're fighting something, we want to eradicate it as fast as possible. All this, I mean,
Right.
that goes true with everything we hear in the news. Same thing with a war. I'm trying to wipe this out. When we're at peace and we allow, I'm going to adjust that vertebra. It's not up to me. I'm at peace. I've done my job. I've done my piece. Now it's your time to take over, right? There's a difference in that. Instead of, okay, we better get rid of this infection. You got to take this pill, take that shot, do this, do that. Let's fight, 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 fight. Being at ease and being at peace, that's when we see true change, I feel.
So a patient today asked me, so how long is it going to be before this stops, this sentence, you know, the symptom? And of course I said, I really don't know, but he was not in an accepting mode. And I can understand it. It's very hard to accept a symptom when you're having it.
Oh, absolutely. I always say it's a gift, and I've had a lot better gifts. But
It is a gift.
yeah,
It's a fucking gift.
it's a fucking gift. You know, the whole thing of this, you know, when we're treating disease, I think we got caught up a lot in this, you know, fighting disease. You know, they get the sick well and to keep the well staying well, or whatever we used to say. You know, that's where we kind of got ourselves into a pickle. If we're treating that, and that's the time I'll use the word treatment, you know, even a back pain or a sciatica or, you know, a liver dysfunction. If I'm adjusting for that, I'm in my present, I'm really thinking for the future. I'm not in present time consciousness. I'm adjusting that bone. But if I'm adjusting it for another result, I'm really thinking of something else. I'm not really in that moment of that one adjustment. And I find that power. And I keep going back to Clarence Gonstead, because when he said, I become one with the bone, I heard that in school, and it's resonated with me since. And becoming one with that bone, I see that in that present time, in that moment, is when all that magic happens. If I'm before it, or if I'm thinking of something else, that magic is something else. That's what I feel about that. Go ahead.
All processes take time.
Yeah.
But who's to say that the time can't be instantaneous? When I give an adjustment, it's possible. They'll be instantaneous. The time will be so quick.
Absolutely.
I've seen that.
Things can change quickly or they can change slowly. It's not up to us. It's that and it's also, you know, what happens when the patient feels worse. You know, there are two quick stories. One was the day I took national boards, I felt like crap all day. The first time I took part one at boards, and I was at Sherman at the time, and Graham Dobson was my chiropractor. He was teaching at the school, and he was my chiropractor. And I went to see Graham after the exam, and he adjusted me. And by the time I drove all the way across Spartanburg, which is 15 minutes at rush hour if you've ever been there, then back to my apartment, I was running a raging fever. I had more symptoms. My body had been subluxated all day and was trying to express it and couldn't. I got adjusted and I had more symptoms. Was I better or was I worse? I knew I was better, but I was sick as a dog. The other one was I had in my office years and years ago, there's somebody came in that was somebody else's patient, but it was snowing and the person hadn't got to the office, and a woman calls up and says, I've got such bad sciatica, I can't walk, I don't know what happened, you know, can I come and see you? I said, sure, come on in. She comes in with two guys holding her up because she can't walk on this leg because it hurts so much, but it's numb. And it's actually, she said, and I'm checking her and I adjust her and it went from being numb to being pain. And she's screaming. And she says, make it go away, make it go away. When's this going to stop? I said, it's better. it was numb before, which means there's no sensation. Now it hurts. I said, that's an improvement. I said, give it a couple hours and it's going to feel better. I planted the seed, and I said, go back and see Betsy tomorrow when she's back in the office. And Betsy called me the next day and says, this woman came in and saw me today. She says, you were a miracle. She said, you told her it was going to be 2 hours and it went away in 2 hours.
That was lucky, but you programmed that.
The
That's
other part
awesome.
where it went from to help somebody understand that numbness is a more severe condition than pain in that situation is also an interesting thing to think about for practice members and for ourselves.
Well, it's something we have to tell people. I tell them all the time, things might be worse for a little while. Thank goodness.
Yeah.
I want to give a shout out to Mason down here from Parker for joining us. You finally made it. I'm stoked to see you. It's been 2 weeks. We've been on this hiatus. I taught a Nate baby and then I had a week off and we're just getting back. We don't have our regular crew, but I'm happy to see you, Mason.
Likewise. It's good to be here.
Awesome. I'm going to read another thing. I'm going to do a little bit of Didi. Okay. Is that good? This is from page 4, 1910. Supreme spiritual existence can only be obtained through earthly experience. Chiropractic sheds enlightenment upon physical life and spiritual existence. The latter only a continuation of the former. Now, the next one is the amount of intelligence in matter, because we're also on principle number 7. So that's my segue into principle 7, right? When we're talking about the amount of intelligence for any given unit of matter is always 100% and always proportional to its requirements. There are any number of instances in the existence of matter which prove that it has the requisite amount of attention from the creator. Okay. Now, we have what he said in 1910, that spiritual existence can only be obtained through earthly experience. Now, the intelligence within this matter is our earthly experience. Innate is God in the body, giving it animation and keeping our molecules together. That requisite amount is enough and no more. It is, therefore, the perfect amount, 100%. Amount means perfection, and that is what is needed for the maintenance of the unit as it is. No power less than the creator would deprive a unit of matter as its shares of its shares of intelligence. But the limitations of matter may prevent the expression of that intelligence. So we talked about limitations of matter, and I think more and more that the limitations of the matter is between the ears, if anything. We just talked about spontaneous healing. I've experienced one myself after an adjustment. I'll tell you the story. I chipped the olecranon on my elbow at Big Bear, and on Christmas Eve, I got adjusted. I was living in LA and went to every clown in town. And then I finally had a friend of mine came down from Life West, adjusted me properly. Her name was Tracy Morgan. And my elbow immediately healed. I had no more. You remember Tracy, right, David? And my elbow healed. And then we went and danced all night at a Fish show. So we had a really good time. And I celebrated my elbow healing. But after, from Christmas to Valentine's Day, I had a broken elbow until I was adjusted properly and my spirit was able to heal me. But it was still at 100%. You realize we don't have more or less innate. And when people talk about less, subluxation meaning less, and I always mean under, that we can never have less intelligence. We can never have less God. It is 100% all the time, and that's in our 33 principles. Anyway, what did anybody get from that? That's my rant for 5 minutes.
Could you repeat Didi's statement?
Supreme spiritual existence can only be obtained through earthly experience. Chiropractic sheds enlightenment upon physical life and spiritual existence. The latter only a continuation of the former. So spiritual existence is only a continuation of physical life.
Right on.
Now
You
that's
know, it's as if, you know, the creator is using matter and us in order to express itself more. It's an expanding self-expression of God through us. Isn't that something? That's what he's saying. I love that.
I mean, it's such in-depth philosophy. Let's look at it in this way too. Our philosophy is rich. It is not lacking in any way. It's misinterpreted very often, right? That's why we've done this. We've read that passage multiple times. There is such richness in this philosophy that it needs to be talked about, like we have been for the past year and a half doing this, because it's so powerful. And what it does for me is give us purpose. Power on there, Dave. Exactly.
That
Yeah,
one
this-
sentence. Yeah, go ahead.
Go on. I was going to
Just
go
that
back
one
to go on, Steve.
Go ahead, Steve, and then Alan.
No, I'm just reiterating that one sentence. We could spend a year talking about that.
Oh, you could write a whole book about that. Absolutely, positively, and maybe one's
That
coming.
one,
What about you? Go ahead, Alan.
So actually, I love pairing 6 and 7, because limitations of time and limitations of matter are a pair that so few practice members certainly never think about, and most chiropractors don't either. It's that there's limitations of matter, not limitations of the power in the matter. The matter may be damaged. You may have something may have caused a decrease, whether you've been poisoned or whether you broke something and it had to heal and it didn't heal perfectly, whether you cut yourself and you have a scar and the scar is still skin tissue, but it's not the same. But that new tissue is perfect in itself. And the intelligence that manifests through that skin or that bone that's healed differently is still perfect for what it is. There may be limitations. It may not be as strong. It may not be as elastic in those cases. Or other things that go on in the body, but the intelligence that maintains it is still perfect. The universal intelligence maintaining it in existence, the innate intelligence that allows it to adapt and continue to adapt the forces that come into it that affect it on a daily basis, are perfect all the time. But the matter may limit the expression of the intelligence because it isn't perfect.
Just the fact that it's able to repair itself, a self-healing, self-replicating system, is truly mind-boggling. If we're just thinking about how amazing the system is. I just cut my thumb with a grinder. I was cutting a lock off my my storage unit. I forgot the combination, and I ran the thing right into my finger. And my daughter said, she's 7, "Don't worry, your body's going to heal it." And I tell you, I almost cried. My daughter, and it wasn't the cut. It was just how much love was in that. But it's not a mystery. There's wisdom in it. We forget about it. But the thing is, after 7, are people being programmed the other way? Right?
Yep.
That's what's
Oh,
happening.
yeah.
It's the programming. And so what we're doing is giving them hope. Listen, it's going to take time. I had just a woman the other day. She's in her late 70s. She goes, "Okay, I've been coming here a month. I don't feel anything different." I was like, it takes time. She goes, "Yeah, it took my whole life to get in this situation. But what are we going to do next?" And I was like, "Well, let's do a reevaluation," which is really the same thing I do every day. I'm just check her, find a subluxation. And I said, just feel how more supple your body is. And she's like, yeah, you're right. And just giving her the idea, just letting her know everything's going to be okay is all she wanted to know. She's like, all right. And that's all she wanted, to be comforted a little bit, that she is doing something right. And the programming, we're getting through the programming with her. Because you figure, the folks that are basically the Korea age, World War II was the mass production of penicillin and aspirin, the magic things, right? And then vaccines were, Pasquale got a prescription, he'd be 100 and something by now, but he got a vaccine injury at 3 years old. So they had vaccines way back then. So, people saw it's magic, and they've been convinced of that. And, we have a big mission. We have a big job to do. Mason, so down at Parker, how is it? Are you in clinic yet?
I will be in 3 weeks.
3 weeks, congratulations. That's awesome.
How exciting.
That is exciting, man. That is exciting. So,
go
ahead, Steve.
Dee Dee's statement, I'm going back to that. For 40, almost 50 years, the idea of limitation of matter I would focus on. But in this meeting tonight, I'm thinking that, yeah, there can be limitation of matter. That's one way to look at it. But another way to look at it, the way Dee Dee looked at it, is that matter is actually used by spirit in order to expand the spiritual expression, man. Now, we can look at limitation of matter, which is kind of a limiting idea, or we can look at matter as a way to express the divinity in an expansive, expressive way. Because, science tells us in the beginning with the Big Bang, we went from simple to complex, and we keep on expanding. The expression of God through his creation is constantly expanding, man. So yeah, limitation of matter. What's that?
I got one for you that goes right to what you just said. It was something I just read in the paper today, I think.
Let's hear it.
That talking about the expansion of intelligence, and that we're an expression of the moving towards the spirituality. They just there's a theory now. They found goo that's in the bottom of some sinkhole in one of the Great Lakes. It might be Huron, I'm not certain. It's this purple goo at the bottom that's monocell organisms, and they took it and put it in the lab, and by exposing it to more light, they found out the longer the light is, the more light it was exposed to, the more oxygen it made. And this is how the planet changed from cyanobacteria. There you go. I love the science stuff that validates what we do. These cyanobacteria were started to create oxygen, and as the Earth slowed down, this is like 5 billion years ago, right? It's as the Earth slowed down because of the water and the tides of it, that started to slow its spin rate, and there was more daylight and more oxygen was generated by these organisms, and that's what allowed the Earth to have an oxygenated atmosphere over the course of 5 million years after that happened, and that's how we all got here. If it weren't for that, we wouldn't. That expansion from how those cells happened is another story altogether, but those cells started to create more oxygen as they were exposed to more light. Subluxation, unsubluxation. Less light, more light. But they made more oxygen, and that's allowed for an oxygenated atmosphere, which is what we all require. More intelligence, expression of a higher spiritual existence. It's weird. I know it's a stretch, but that's where my brain goes.
Well, I like that. And this physical life and spiritual existence, the latter only a continuation of the former. As we're going through this experience, Pasquale always used to say, they need us, means the spirits on the other side. as much as we need them. And what we're really talking about is that we are not disconnected just because we're in this physical plane. We talk about being connected as beings, and we've proven that with our limited scientific machinery that we can make. But understanding that we are an extension of spirit just in a physical body. Well, two people talk about, the human existence is spiritual. We're just in a material suit, in a meat bag, right? A spiritual being inside this meat suit. And as we're going through this, we have to go through these things. We have to suffer at times. Suffering, in an old definition of suffering, means transformation. And if we just talk about, the most famous suffering of time is Jesus on a cross to get to a higher level, to spiritual existence, to God, to heaven, for change to happen in this earth, to push monotheism even bigger on this planet. There are many different things. The Jews in the desert, we can use a lot of different types of things as metaphors for ourselves. And when I just read something from Arnaud Bernier about, somebody posted something that was pretty deep, and he was going through some big stuff. And Arnaud talked about, the times when he was thinking of suicide and at the worst point of his entire life. And thank goodness that he went through it, because he had to get to where he was, after that. Sometimes we have to go through the shit. You got to go through hell to get through heaven. And, it takes us, it's not always, what happens is we turn into the victim. On my last podcast that I did on the Nate Express was about no more victimhood. Who am I? If this is not happening to me, it's coming from me. Even the subluxation, we know, unless you get hit by a bus or drop a dumbbell on your neck, the subluxation mostly comes through us, about 80%, they say, or something like that. So it's coming from us. So we can be the victim of something, or we can listen to the message and say, okay, where do I need to change? What is it? And I know when I'm going through stuff, the most of giving and receiving is my elbows. I go back to my elbows today. I even talked about this on stage at DE once, of this giving and receiving. And right now I'm going through this elbow stuff, and I didn't do anything for my elbows to hurt, but something is happening. I'm blocked in an energy, and I'm finding out what it is right now. And I've connected to it, and I know what's happening, and I'm going to go resolve it. So, we just have to listen to the language. It's not always wrong. We're not chasing it like the medical fighters, right? But as the peaceful chiropractors, let's find peace in our adjustment, and finding peace, or the piece of the puzzle, right? What is it that needs to be put in place for us to understand this? Go ahead, Steve. You look like you have something to say.
Yeah, well, as you were talking, what comes to mind is our most precious philosophy, ADIO, above, down, inside out, in that, I recently had an old-time friend do something that I still don't understand what the F is going on here. But I was disturbed, and I was blaming and looking outside of me to fix the problem. And then when I had a buddy of mine work it through, I went, well, what is inside of me that's being disturbed? And then I went inside and gave that inner disturbance what it needed, which was love and acceptance, which put me in the driver's seat. This is what we teach, that healing comes from above, down, inside out, and every problem can be solved ADIO. Medicine is outside in, trying to move the symptom around. We go to the source, because where did that disturbance come from? And where does that love come from? The sunset? The wife? No. The bank account? So what we do with our philosophy is besides the adjustment, man. It's like, I am the cause of health or disease. It's inside of me. The cause and cure is internal, right?
Yep.
You know how big that is?
It's tremendous. If we can get that concept out to the world, do you think we would save a few lives? You know, the outside of that, you know, it's that is the biggest concept of the world to understand, that the body heals itself.
I think that concept is already in the world. It's already in everybody, but it's like the distractions, like the TV, you know, telling us a vision, or the, you know, Fox
Nice.
News or CNN or, you know, different things like that are clouding the true message. I think if there wasn't TV, or if there wasn't any education, I think an individual would connect with their source and more people would be connected. But it's like, you know, people sit home, they watch The Bachelor, they watch the Olympics, they watch the election, they watch, you know, Governor Cuomo resign and Bill Cosby. You know, it's just, there's so much, they're inundated. The world is so small right now. You know, it's like with the COVID, the 2 new strands that are coming out, they say, you know, before COVID, I was 50 years old. So figure from age 30 to 50 was 20 years. And you guys would probably side with me on this, each of you. In the last 20 years, from age 30 to 50, maybe 2 times out of those 20 years, I got the flu pretty bad. I went down for maybe 2 or 3 days. Then maybe 8 times out of those 20 years, I just wasn't feeling too well. And maybe I just shut down for a day, wasn't so bad. And then maybe 8 times or 12 times out of those 20 years, I just had like a little snipple and I blew it off. And it was all kinds of different strands. But it's like now that people are so hyper focused on every little, you know what I mean?
Well, that's Plato's allegory of the cave. I tell everybody to read that, the allegory of the cave. You know, you give somebody enough programming long enough, they believe that to be reality. Once they break those chains, then see what reality really it is, they end up killing themselves. And I want to acknowledge there's Dr. Chase Dice down there that just, you know, is not it must be out for a walk when he's doing this on our podcast.
What was that book again, Peg?
Plato's Allegory of the Cave. It's Plato.
The story, I don't think it's a whole book. Yeah.
It's well, you can actually watch the story of it on YouTube. There's 100 different cartoons about it, and it's amazing. But what we're talking, you know,
Plato's Allegory
of the Cave, CAVE, correct. So
it's interesting what Steve was saying about suffering and love, and that's part of, you know, Buddhist philosophy is you face your suffering, you give it love, you pay attention to the things that are affecting you, and pay attention and look at them closely and see what the bigger picture of them is, and love them and allow them to, and that dissipates them overall. The other thing was that something you were saying earlier, Haig, about peace, and when we remember the physiology of, you know, so many people are in sympathetic overload, and when we adjust, it tends to move them towards parasympathetic, which is relaxation and peace. We want to help our practice members establish peace within themselves, or allow them to establish peace within themselves. And that's maybe the biggest thing we can do. And when you were saying earlier about talking to a practice member, it's and saying, she was saying, what I don't feel any different. And I like to ask people what else may have changed for you? Find that ache and pain, whatever brought you here, may still be bothering you some. What else is going on in your life in the last month since you've been getting under care? Tell me something else that's different. And they always have something. They always notice when you ask them and they think about it, they go, oh yeah, you know, I stopped eating this, or I started to walk more every day, or there's always something that's changed for them and that they just haven't thought about. We don't pay enough attention to the small things.
How much of the body has somatic sensory?
You know, we're on
10%, right?
What's
Yeah,
that?
8 to 12%, right? So if
Yeah.
somebody says they feel good, I say to them, I said, that's great. I love that you feel good. That's called somatic sensory, what you can feel, touch certain areas of the body. And that represents about 8 to 12% of what you feel. And then I go into, how about the other 88 to 92% that you don't feel? Heart function, cardiovascular, pulmonary, integumentary, all the other different things. If you feel comfortable here and you feel comfortable with me checking you for subluxations and you think that, this is a way of life, I would suggest that your only problem is going to be is finding a chiropractor when I retire in 17 years. That's it. Truth, right?
That's it. Absolutely. Well, we touched on a lot of things. We went through spirituality, through material existence, through the amount of intelligence in matter, and all things take time. And so I think we touched on quite a bit of what it is to be a peaceful chiropractor and not a medical fighter. So instead of saying I was going to do principle number 8 today, let's save principle 8 for next week. We'll do that one. We're going to read through that because that'll sort of tie up some things. I'm going to just outline a couple of things in those next couple of pages of this. And then we're going to go back to D.D. Palmer. Does that sound good?
Yeah.
And I think we left off at about page 90 or something on the 1910. Let's get back into the father of chiropractic, break it down, understand it, digest it, and we can share it to the world. Sound like a good plan, everybody?
Because the next one goes into a lot of good stuff. Yeah.
Next week
good.
goes in a lot of we'll save from principle 8 and go on through those pages, okay? And then principle number 9 doesn't pick up again until 244, I think, something like that.
We won't even get through 8 next week. There's too much stuff. There's so much stuff there.
I have a note. 244 is actually where I have my note to stop. So we're going to go all the way through from page bottom of 240 to 244 if we get through all that stuff. Okay?
Yeah, I see. Principle 9 is on 250. So yeah.
Yeah, I have it stopping at 320 is where my last outline was. Okay.
Are you guys in right now?
What's that?
What book are you in right now?
Stevenson's textbook,
Stevenson.
the 33
Got it.
principles, and we're breaking it down in the senior text of Stevenson's.
Okay, so what page?
What we are going to be on principle number 8 on page 240. That's about halfway down article 316 in Stevenson's textbook.
Okay. Cool.
And then we'll work from there, okay? Anybody have any questions or you got a
Excellent.
bad connection, just send me a message. Bring more people in. Tell everybody I'm back. I took 2 weeks off, and but we've got some new people showing up. Chase, great to see you. Mason, my man, I'm happy to see your face. And we'll be in Parker. Let's work it for 2022. How does that sound?
Sounds great.
Awesome, brother. We'll talk more. I hope I see you more. I know you have your meetings with Delta Sigma Chi, but we'll work around it however we can. All right.
Sounds great.
All right, everybody. I love and appreciate you. Thank you. God bless you, and have a good night, man. I'll see you guys next week.
Good to see you guys. Thank you. Good night.
Good night.
Thanks for letting me join, guys.
Anytime. I want you next time. Invite more students.